Thank you, Presiding Member, for the opportunity to speak on this historic occasion. I say historic because we have a resolution before the House that has been signed by the Honorable Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Honorable Nimal Siripal de Silva on behalf of the SLFP, the Honorable Lakshman Kiriella, the Leader of the House, the Honorable Rauf Hakim, the Leader of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress, the Honorable Malik Samaravikrama, Honorable D M Swaminathan, Honorable Dr. Vijayadas Rajapaksa, and Honorable Patalis Champika Ranawaka as Leader of the Jathika Hela Urumaya, setting out the purposes for which this country has to enact a new constitution, and thereafter listing out the modalities by which this drafting procedure is to take place. Now, so far as I can gather from the debate today, I don't think there is anyone in this House who says that the country does not need a new constitution. Although outside this House there have been pronouncements made that all we require is amendments, I don't hear anyone seriously challenging the proposition that the country does need a new constitution. We had the first Republican Constitution in 1972 and the second Republican Constitution under which we function now, adopted in 1978. Although these two are called Republican Constitutions, already speakers on both sides of the House have stated clearly how these two constitutions were made. The governments of that day, the United Front government in the 1970s, early 1970s, and thereafter the UNP government that came in 1977, both had the requisite two-thirds in Parliament, and therefore what they enacted as constitution for the whole country merely mirrored their own versions, what for that time being they thought was good, not for the country, but what they thought was expedient was enacted as the constitutions. Most importantly, in both those procedures, the Tamil-speaking people of this country were left out, particularly the Tamils were left out. If there is a recognition that there live in this country different peoples belonging to different linguistic, cultural, ethnic groupings, those who have different religions, and together there is a mix of rich diversity that must enhance the character of this country, then certainly the first and the second Republican constitutions must be done away with. And we must start from that declared status that all are equal in this country, that each group, each people have a stake in this country, and not just as individuals equality, even as communities, as peoples, they are equal to each other. That fundamental premise is a sine qua non for this island to continue as one strong country. It was the non-recognition of that fundamental character of this country that resulted in large amount of misery, 3 decades of actual fighting, and a conflict that has raged since independence even to this day. The Constitution cannot grant preeminence to one or the other group of people. And I'm glad His Excellency the President, while speaking after the resolution was moved, very clearly said that the leader of the United National Party moved this resolution on which His Excellency as the leader of the SLFP, as well, very clearly enunciated the thought processes last Saturday. So we have seen a paradigm shift in the thinking, in the presentation of this resolution, which has been affirmed by the leaders of the 2 main parties of this country. And this is significant because the history of our country, particularly that of constitution making and also of various efforts at reconciliation, is marred by one party or the other opposing the initiatives taken by the party that is in office at that time. This is the first time we have the leaders of the 2 parties clearly enunciating to the country that this must be done and setting out the fundamental or the premise on which we must build a new constitution. I heard the Honorable Chief Opposition Whip, my friend Honorable Anura Kumara Dissanayaka, who stated that the problems faced by the Tamil people is not that of the constitution, but day-to-day affairs, economic difficulties, lack of job opportunities, and the like. Our people face all of that and more, particularly after the cruel war that they had to face for such a long time. The recovery from that has been very, very difficult for lack of political will, for various other reasons. Our people face enormous amount of day-to-day problems. But that is not the fundamental issue faced by our people. And I'm sad that a party like the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, which expounds such progressive thoughts and ideas on other fronts, is not able to see this. They are not able to see it also because of the language divide. As I stated while he was speaking, when he accused the Tamil National Alliance of not being close to our people, not getting involved with the day-to-day difficulties and the problems that they face. The reason is the Sinhala papers don't publish any of those stories. What happens there stays there and in the Tamil media. What happens here stays here and limited to the Sinhala media. And the converse is also true. If today you go to a Tamil-speaking area and talk to them about some of the developments in the south, particularly by a small group of people who are trying to whip racial tensions in this country, they are totally unaware. That is not depicted there. And so we journey along whether the constitution says separation is illegal or no, in fact on the ground as two separate worlds, not meeting in any way. Now, if we are to forge ahead as one country, we must realize this. We must realize this and accommodate all the different communities, all the different peoples of this country by granting them equal status, never mind what their numbers are. The type of constitution that we were given, Ceylon Independence Act in 1947, gave us a system of simple majority rule. And that is what gave rise to majoritarianism. What some people don't realize today is that what they call a unitary state is actually a majoritarian state. Because if you implement one important aspect of democracy, which is majority rule, in a heterogeneous country like ours, where there is a permanent majority and permanent minorities, all the time it is the will of the majority that prevails. And that is why it was possible in 1949 to deprive a section of our people of their citizenship itself. Their absolute fundamental right to be a citizen of this country. People who had voted in the first election, who were able to elect 7 representatives to parliament, were deprived of their franchise because they did not have the majority numbers. And that was repeated in 1956, when the Official Languages Act was passed. Because of the fact that one people have an overwhelming majority in the country in matters that affect them and the permanent minority peoples, and I'm using the word minority only in terms of numbers, those who are minority in number, it is always the will of the majority that prevails. And that is why it is important that the system of government must be changed. That it will not be possible for one community to override the others merely because of the strength of their numbers in this country. There must be some fundamental safeguards. Now, when such an adjustment is made so that even those who are smaller in numbers are able to exercise governmental power, at least in the areas in which they live substantially in numbers, then there can be a balance that is struck. Then it is possible for all these peoples to live together as one country because they share power in an equitable way. Not leave it to one center that decides, overridingly decides what happens to the others. And they have no say whatever because they are minority in numbers. Now this is a fundamental thing, and the world over has had different ways in which countries in which different peoples live are able to share power and live together. And then there are other fundamental issues like human rights, which will have to apply to all equally. So institutions of government must be so worked that people of all the different people's groups have a stake in it, have participation in it. It is the exclusion of the Tamil students from tertiary educational institutions in the 70s, coupled with the first Republican constitution which effectively alienated the Tamil people from the institution of the state, that resulted in a call for a separate state. And justifiably so. Justifiably so, because if you can't accommodate, if you can't live together, if you don't have the will to share power with everyone irrespective of their numbers, then you must let them live by themselves. You can't hold on to them and insist that your writ must run in their lives too. That was sought to be changed. This fundamental flaw was addressed in the Indo-Lanka Accord. I heard the Honorable Andhra Kumar Dissanayaka say that all the agreements have had foreign pressures. I like to ask him the question, what foreign pressure was there for Bandaranaike Chelvanayagam Pact? What foreign pressure was there for Dudley Chelvanayagam Pact? There was no foreign pressure. But two prime ministers of this country, great leaders of this country, made pacts with the leader of the Tamil people and failed to keep those promises, failed to honor that pact. And that failure, when they failed to do that, the Tamil people could do nothing because we were small in numbers. That's when we appeal to outside world. We have to. If you don't do the right thing by us, you can't expect us to fold our hands and collapse. We will not do that. That is when our youth took to arms. You can't expect that you can do this right, sign pacts, tear them up, and then expect us to be meek and mild and be obedient. No, that will not happen, and that did not happen. But now we have come a long way from that. From the speech that His Excellency delivered on Saturday and the objectives that are enunciated in this resolution, it's clear that there is a realization now, at least now, a realization that we must change the rules by which we engage, the rules by which we live. That social compact under which the country attained independence in 1947, where there were safeguards put in, that even the parliament could not pass laws that took away rights of certain people or conferred on others rights that were not conferred on everybody. That was done away with through a procedure in 1970 to 1972, which proclaimed that it was an autochthonous constitution, but there the autochthonous only meant that the people who were majority in numbers of this country had their way and not the others. And in 1978, they followed the procedure that was laid down in the first Republican Constitution, had a parliamentary select committee. And as Honorable Dinesh Gunawardena read out portions from the Hansard, that ULF stayed away, had to stay away with a 5/6 majority. That government steamrolled and enacted a constitution. That should not happen. That should not happen. Today we are at a stage when history is to be made. The bitter experiences of the past must not be missed. We must learn from that. And that is why the two main parties and the leaders of the two main parties have put this resolution forward. And that is why we are supportive of this procedure. Now, there's so much talk about this procedure, and I was glad that the Honorable Douglas Devananda said the discussion in this House is akin to splitting hairs. Everybody wants the new constitution to be made in terms of what is laid down in the present constitution, that the present constitution should not be violated. I don't see anything in the resolution that has been placed before the House violating the present constitution. If you care to read Article 74 of the present Constitution, it very specifically gives the power to Parliament, either by standing orders or by resolution, deal with the matters that the Parliament is authorized to deal with. And in Article 75, making of a new constitution is a matter that the Parliament has been authorized, is one of the matters that Parliament has been authorized to deal with. So the Constitution is quite clear for anybody who is able to read. Parliament has been given the power to enact, repeal and replace it with repeal the Constitution and replace it with a new Constitution. And for doing that, it has one of two options. It can do it under standing orders, or it can do it by resolution, and the resolution then will control the whole procedure. But here, what does the resolution itself say? Resolution is not giving this power to somebody else outside. That is semantics to say so. This resolution is calling on Parliament to form a constitutional assembly consisting of the 225 members of this Parliament, no one else. The standing order provisions talks about a committee of the whole House. Technically, this is not a committee of the whole House, but it is by resolution. You can either do it by standing orders or by resolution, but the end result is the same thing. How does that change? How does the nature of the Constitutional Assembly in this resolution change from a committee of the whole House? It is the committee of the whole House. Because the resolution, even though Parliament could have resolved otherwise, this resolution only authorizes Parliament to make a Constitutional Assembly consisting of the members of Parliament themselves and no other. And eventually, very clearly, even it says for the avoidance of doubt, it follows the procedure that is laid down in the Constitution. That there must be a certificate by the Cabinet of Ministers that this is a bill for the repeal and replacement of the Constitution, and that it is intended to be passed by a two-thirds majority and placed before the people at a referendum. That's a requirement in this Constitution, and the resolution says so specifically. I was alarmed when I heard Honorable Dinesh Gunawardena say, we want to go to court. You can't go to court. He says we want to follow the constitutional procedure. The Constitution itself says when there is a bill for the repeal and replacement of the Constitution, the court has no jurisdiction. You only have to read Article 120B. Very specifically says, the moment the Cabinet of Ministers certify that it is a bill for the repeal and replacement of the Constitution, it says the Supreme Court shall not exercise any further jurisdiction. Quite logical, don't you think? The only point that the Supreme Court can ever rule when a bill is challenged is whether it is inconsistent with the Constitution. If you are replacing the Constitution, by definition, it is inconsistent with this Constitution. And if it is inconsistent with the Constitution, the Supreme Court can only say, it can't say it can't be enacted. It can only say that you must place it before the people at a referendum. Here is a certificate of the Cabinet of Ministers that is intended to be passed by two-thirds majority and placed before the people at a referendum. There is no place for the Supreme Court also to rule that you must place it before the people at a referendum. That is superficial. And that is why Article 120 very specifically says that when the long title says this is for repeal and the replacement of the Constitution, 120B says, where the Cabinet of Ministers certifies that a bill which is described in its long title as being for the amendment of any provision of the Constitution or for the repeal and replacement of the Constitution intended to be passed with a special majority required by Article 83 and submitted to the people by referendum, the Supreme Court shall have and exercise no jurisdiction in respect of such bill. You want a new Constitution drafted and adopted in terms of this Constitution. That is your position. If that be so, how can you then ask that this matter must go to Supreme Court? It says you can't go to Supreme Court. You must choose one of the two. You must either choose to do it under the Constitution, or you must say we'll stand outside the Constitution, we'll go to court. If you are doing it under the provisions of this Constitution, there's an express prohibition to challenge it in the Supreme Court. And as I said, logically so, because that long title itself by definition is inconsistent with this constitution and will require a referendum. So, thank you. So therefore, I appeal to the members of this House, please don't split hairs on a procedure. All of your concerns, I have only 1 minute, please speak later. I have only 1 minute, please don't disturb me. Therefore, that members of this parliament have expressed their concerns, and I respect those concerns, I value those concerns. I say with respect, sir, that all of those concerns are contained in this procedure that has been laid down. It is members of this parliament who will draft it. You only draft it. They are not going to adopt it like the 1970 Constituent Assembly. It is not a Constituent Assembly. The new constitution, it says very clearly, for avoidance of doubt, will be adopted by this parliament through the procedure that has been laid down in this constitution. And therefore, I like to appeal to those members who are seated in the opposition, who call themselves joint opposition. I don't know why they call themselves joint opposition. Nevertheless, you are joined. You are joined. Yeah, you are not joined with us. But I appeal to them. You were on the other side under President Rajapaksa. He made various efforts to change the fundamental premise of the Constitution. He even signed joint communiques with international actors, various others, saying that this premise will be changed. All of those are in writing. Now, it is true that some of you are on that side and some of you are on this side. But I'm winding up now. But please don't repeat the grave mistakes that were made in history by the two main parties. Even though you are part of one main party, please don't fall into that error yet again. Be statesman-like and join in this process so that we can all join together and go forward as one country. Thank you.